Welcome to Hobby Clubhouse, with a look at the Bandai High Complete Model 1144 Gundam Mk-II from the discontinued High Complete Model line from back in the 80s. Okay, story time. The HCM line was made by Bandai's Hobby division, which didn't make any pre-built figures at the time in the 80s, and that was very much the domain of Bandai's Toy division, and that might be the reason why the Hobby division was a little bit anxious about overstepping into the Toy division's turf. So the box insists that it's a model and it's not an action figure, even though it's totally an action figure. According to this pamphlet from Bandai that's given to store owners in the 80s, the HCM line is for fans who aren't confident in all the gluing and the sanding and the painting required for Gundam model kits at the time, and they can enjoy an anime-accurate version of their favorite MSs right out of the box. Other selling points include better articulation than traditional model kits, like opening hatches on the cockpits, and looks that are so good that they can decorate all your 80s hi-fi equipment. As a footnote, here are the suggestions that Bandai gives for selling HCM products if you're a store owner in the 80s. First of all, set up a separate and distinct area for displaying HCM products to fully show them off. Second, display the open products in the display window, which is a little concerning how Bandai feels they need to tell a store owner this. And then lastly, they suggest you put more variety on the shelf and less of each item to let people know the awesome collection that they can own through the HCM line. It's kinda cute how Bandai did this to help store owners, but I don't really think this is much that any store owner wouldn't have figured out by themselves through common sense already. The HCM line is more notable for covering quite a few non-Gundam real robot series like Elgaim and Zabongol and Vifam. If you don't know what their deal is, make sure to watch my retrospective on Sunrise and Bandai's 80s real robot series that tells you all about them. Otherwise, the line was mostly not that controversial, and even though it wasn't a huge success, it did actually get a direct successor with the HCM Pro line, which maybe more people watching this video might have, and maybe some of you guys are only now realizing why the HCM Pro line is called HCM Pro. So yes, it all started back here with the HCM line, which gave us this Gundam Mk-II, which was released in June 1985 and sold for a price of 2,000 yen. As a reference, the non-grade 1144 Mk-II sold for a price of 500 yen. The box has this blueprint-like layout at the front here, which is a very 80s thing, and the monochrome print here is bold and classy, avoiding the loud colors that's usually used for children's toys. This also means that there is no particular artist credited to this box art. The box measures 15 by 18 by 6.5 centimeters, and the box height should be uniform for the entire series because these are meant to be displayed side by side on a shelf, which is very classy and very grown up. The short side of the box tells us that this is the 15th release in the series, and everything else is repeated from the front of the box. The other side looks exactly the same, and here it is in case you're really curious for some reason. The long side has just the same basic information, and it isn't used for any studio shots or anything to keep this clean for a shelf display. The other side of the box shows us the Mk-II from another view, and everything else on there is the same. The back is shockingly empty, and I can't imagine Bandai ever allowing the designers to do this today on any retail product. There's no visual information whatsoever on the figure inside, so you have no idea what accessories you get, or even if it's complete like they say it is. And that's asking a lot of faith from someone who's putting down 2,000 yen in 1985. Inside the box, we get a styrofoam tray for everything, which anyone who buys old Japanese toys from the 80s and 90s will absolutely remember. I'm sure it was dreadful for the environment, but collectors all have a soft spot for these, including me. And you can't smell it from the video, but the inside smells horrible of everything having been trapped in here for 30 years. It smells like burnt things and old damp air, which I'm sure is very toxic, and it's very much inside my lungs now. The front here is covered with a white piece of card, and underneath, we get the black and white instructions. And then we get this piece of information card, which you get with all the figures in the line. Here's the tray as you would have seen it in 1985, and it really would have been breathtaking back then because it's not trivial to find a Gundam Mk-II looking this colorful and this complete back then. Your only other choice was the deluxe Gundam Mk-II from Bandai's Toy division, which was much bigger, both in terms of size and its price tag. Right underneath the beam rifle's runner, we have this little bag of stuff here, and here's another one of these old fan things. Bandai used to staple their bags like this until around the late 90s, and if you're old enough, you're gonna remember seeing these stapled bags like this in all your Bandai model kits before they moved on to heat sealing them. So leave a shout out down below in the comments if you've had these staple bags in your kits or old products. I'm sure there's at least a few of you. And in case you're pulling out your hair seeing me open this bag, I mean, really don't worry. There are a lot of these Mark II figures around, and there's also a lot of the Hyzak. These things just never sold well, and I used to see them just everywhere. It's not like eating some sort of turtle that's on the brink of extinction. It's more like a pigeon that's really old and it smells really funky. For documentation's sakes, here's a runner for the beam rifle, front and back. And then here's the runner for the beam sabers. Here's a runner for a yellow blade antenna. And then here's a runner for the gray part in soft polyethylene. And then here's a runner for the Vulcan pod and some other small parts. The info card we saw earlier tells us all about the Gundam Mk-II, and this is mostly all stuff that we now get as a part of the instructions booklet, but these cards you can keep in a 2-ring binder, and Bandai included these as well for some other kits like the one right here that I have from El Gaim. The backside gives us more information on all the weapons, even though you don't get most of these functions on the figure, which kinda sucks. You can really see how 30 years stuck in the box has aged this card quite a lot. This box I found was hidden in the back of a shelf by some other boxes, and it was covered in a thick layer of dust, so it's really been through some rough times. The front of the instructions gives us a list of things in the box with a delightfully 80s sci-fi computer font. Back gives us some shots of the figure even though it's all in black and white. The insides are for the actual instructions, and there really isn't a lot they need to tell you. And it's here that we can see that mine is from the 1994 run, with the instructions being a February 1994 revision. In barely any time at all, we get the best that money could get you in 1985. A full-colored, pre-built Gundam Mk-II, mostly as you saw it from the animation. You'll easily notice that the proportions are really quite different from what we're used to seeing today. It's closer to a real human here with the big head and its shorter shins. But before we look at the good stuff, we have to talk about all the stubs left on the pieces, like the ones here on the vents, and this one here on the top of the front skirt. Or how about this ugly bit on the side of the head? I mean, these are everywhere, and they even affect the fitting on some of the parts in some cases, and it's quite shocking to see today. But at least Bandai wasn't lying that this isn't a figure but a pre-built model. It's just that it was built by that one cousin that's new to Gundam models and he isn't very good at it yet. I mean, look at this part right here on the side of the chest here with the plastic all dug out like this. It's really sloppy, and fans today really wouldn't find this very acceptable. But then the question becomes, well, can we fix it up ourselves? And the answer is a delightful yes. So unlike some figures today that are glued and snapped shut with hooks, the Mk-II can be disassembled from head to toe. Let me show you with this arm right here, where you can also see the die-cast part used for the shoulder connection here. And the other end on the torso has a polycap inside, which at the time was only used for more expensive kits. Anyway, if we take this arm right here, it can easily be taken apart into all the pieces right here. And you can take a knife and clean up all the gates to your heart's content. It's very satisfying, but at the same time, I thought Bandai said this figure was supposed to save us time. Now there are a few screws that holds the part together, but none of them are hidden or none of them are hard to access. With the cleanup all done, let's look at the colors here on the chest area, which is not all that amusing to modernize, but the color separation with plastic is something far ahead of its time for 1985. I mean, I know it's a little hard to get excited about this now, but this parts and color separation really was something special. And maybe you've also noticed this not so nicely sculpted face up here, which is really puffy and bloated. Sadly, it won't be another 12 or 13 years before Bandai finally followed the trend among builders to slim down the face and straighten up the eyes. And if you buy any old Gundam products, one of the most jarring differences for a modern fan will be these old faces, which often look either like this one or some other kind of weird. I mean, yes, this absolutely does look strange, even to me as an old fan, and it's not that good. And let's try swapping in the yellow blade antenna. You're gonna need a tool like this part separator to pry the antenna out because it's harder to get off than you might expect. My figure here has a few yellow spots from the dust that's settled onto it for so many years, so I got out some alcohol and I gave it a good cleaning. The entire figure actually had a lot of these spots when I first opened it, but I cleaned them up before the review to keep it from looking kinda gross. With all that done, you can simply slide the yellow one in its place, and then we have this look which is much closer to what we expect for the Mk-II, even though the red crest in the middle is sadly uncolored. I don't think the gray color for the first antenna is intentional. I think the polycap material that they use, the polyethylene, happens to be gray, and they wanted an antenna that's in the soft material so that when a younger fan plays with it, they can play with the figure without breaking the antenna, and the color was just a consequence of that choice. The yellow one is for older fans who want it in the right color, but I've kind of grown to like that gray one as its own thing. And you want to see something else that's really cool? The cockpit here actually opens with the top door swinging up like this, and then the bottom red door swinging down like this, revealing the entrance to the insides. And you know what? This is something no other 1144 Gundam Mk-II can do other than the real grade. So, as of today, this is still the only other 1144 Mk-II to have this gimmick, strange as that seems. Continuing on with the fancy moving parts, the hand here is fully articulated with the bottom 3 fingers folding inwards like this, and then the trigger finger moving separately. The fingers are held on with a metal rod, so there's no wobbling or no shakiness or anything. This style of hand would be used for many of the higher end kits for many years, way into the late 90s, even with the first master grade kits. While we're here, there's also this round piece that you're supposed to put in like this onto the arm to plug up that shaft for the screw, which is really nice that they did it, but it's also really weird how this is black and the entire arm is white, and once you put it in, you can never take it out again, so I've opted not to put mine in. Speaking of limbs, the Mk-II has really big feet, which at least helps the figure stand up really well, but I hope you can see from the video just how massive these things are. Now I don't have a plain Gundam Mk-II, so I'm gonna have to call in my custom team of Titans Mk-II here in their 3 combat configurations in for some help. The old HG Mk-II's feet really helps us see not only how wide the old feet are, but you can also see how the entire lower leg is just really massive. For weapons, we have the Mk-II's beam rifle here with a really long side handle that's unlike any other rendition of this weapon. It's a single molded piece, but it's not as thin as Bandai might do it today, with enough depth for a lot of the details on the body of the gun. The articulated hand can hold the gun, but the grip is quite loose and it rattles around a little bit. And surprisingly, that long side handle actually works, and this other hand can grip it like this, which isn't something the non-grade model kits could do. Then we have the Vulcan pod, which once again gets an awkward gray section right here, just so that the antenna up top can be in the soft polycap material. But you can just as well imagine this as some kind of color separation, and at the very least, the center circle here is used as a peg, so it's part separated and it's really easy to paint. It just slides onto the head from the back, and it can be really easily knocked out of place by mistake. And here's the shield, which is perhaps the most colorful among all the accessories that we get, with the red part right here done in plastic, and then the blue area down here that's painted from the factory. This is another one of those things that seems like quite a small deal nowadays, because this is like the bare minimum we expect now, so really the times have changed. The back side here has some basic details, but it's not as elaborate as what we would get nowadays, and it's all white here since they really didn't expect people to look at this side all that much. The shield attaches to the side of the arms like this, and if you didn't plug up the screw shaft on the other arm, this will fit onto both arms just fine. The last of the included weapons is the beam saber, which is sadly in all black like this, so you're gonna have to paint both the handle and the blade. You get 2 of these, which they really didn't have to do, but they did. The beam blade is really short, but that's the style at the time and it's not the fault of the figure. And it goes into the hand without fuss. There is a little bit of wiggle, but the hand does manage to hold it well enough. But wait, there's more! There is a secret weapon for the Mk-II, because included is this little clip here which replaces this piece on the back skirt here, which is really annoying and really hard to remove and it just doesn't want to come out. But once it's out, you can put the clip in its place, and this is actually for the bazooka, which you can get in the non-grade 1144 weapon set, which we've briefly seen in the HGUC Hyzak review, and it's become useful once again right here. So as you'd expect, the bazooka mounts right onto the clip right here to give us the full weapons loadout for the Mk-II, which is quite cool how it's compatible like this. Or so I thought until I checked the piece afterwards, and then I noticed that the clip had a stress mark already right here in the middle. That isn't like reflecting off of it, it's the plastic turning white after being stressed. So this piece is probably gonna break if you use it a few too many times, which is a bit of a bummer. But on the bright side, the bazooka can be held in an underslung grip like this, so yeah, the bazooka absolutely works as an extra weapon for this figure, which is a nice surprise. And here's a hidden gimmick that isn't documented anywhere on this figure or in its instructions. You can actually turn this kit into the Super Gundam. Yes, the classic 1144G Defensor kit was actually made to be compatible with this figure as well. I don't have one, but if I get one someday, you bet I'll show you guys an HCM Super Gundam, so hopefully that day will come soon. On to the articulation. The head goes up only a tiny little bit, and it really doesn't go down at all. It turns side to side until the chin hits the collar. The 1985 shoulders do amazingly swing. It's a tiny little bit, but the idea is ahead of its time. The arms swing outwards up to here, and the entire arm can swing around without anything getting in the way. The biceps allow the arms to rotate, but only until it gets caught about here, and here in the other direction. The elbow swings up a really disappointingly small amount, and the hands can be adjusted on their ball joint, and they can rotate around a full circle. The waist does rotate, but it's barely anything at all. The skirt armor is all molded together and is fixed in place, so nothing down here moves at all from front to back. The backpack has separate thrusters, but they don't actually move, and the beam saber racks can be adjusted on a single axis. The legs can swing outwards a little bit. The kick forward is severely limited by the skirt armor, and the same goes in the other direction. The knee bend is something around 30 degrees, which, yes, you may laugh at it, it is pretty sad. And the same goes with the foot that goes up a teeny tiny bit, and it goes back barely anything at all. They swing side to side, but it's barely enough to be useful at all in practice. If you've watched enough of my other videos, you'll know that Bandai always had made advancements in color separation and part separation far before the articulation catches up. So you're gonna get a lot of products that look good way beyond their time. Once you try to move them, you will be reminded of when it came from. As forgiving as I am, this is a really hard figure to have any fun with. The arms and the legs and basically all the joints trap all that amazing engineering into just a very narrow range of motion. And now you know that if you've ever seen any photos of any of these figures, they're always in a slightly awkward and unnatural pose, or they're just standing straight because sadly that's all they can do, which is a shame for something that looks so good. For scale accuracy, the Hobby Clubhouse scale ruler tells us that this Mk-II is around 19 meters, so that's almost right on the mark of the target 18.5 meters. For size comparisons, here's the lower end benchmark, the much younger entry grade RX-78. And then, here's the upper end benchmark, the entry grade new Gundam. The Mk-II is indeed supposed to be a little bit taller than the RX-78, so even with the wonky modern 1144 scale, the old figure still fits in without too much difficulty. It is shorter than the new Gundam, of course, and you can see just how big that head is and those feet are compared to modern proportions. Now, this isn't a product in circulation anymore, so there is no 3-point verdict here and this isn't a review. I don't think Bandai is going to make any more of these unless it's for a one-time run like in 2006 where they actually added a Titans color Mk-II and an Earth Federation color Hyzak, which was pretty cool of them to add new variants to the series, but no, I don't think that's going to happen again in the future. I was super excited when I dug this out of that shelf because I can show everyone what the high complete model line was all about. It's hopelessly obsolete against modern collector's figures like the amazing Robot Damashi version Anime Mk-II, and it's such a shame that the HCM isn't really the origins of any of those later products. But it is the first attempt of Bandai's hobby division at capturing the collector's market. They understood what a collector's figure was, and it's all embodied here in this product. No costs are spared for color accuracy and function, and you get a beautiful product right out of the box even if you're not a super experienced builder. And for that, it earned its place in Gundam product history. Thank you so much for watching. Support the channel today by becoming a Hobby Clubhouse member here on YouTube or over on Patreon. Also, come look us up on social media with updates on upcoming videos and sneak peeks at future projects. Links are in the description below. Or hang out here some more with one of these other videos like the Gundam Shop Volume 2 video, which features this and other HCM figures. But before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos from Hobby Clubhouse, and I'll see you next time.